The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Chair, in dealing with part 2, I want to also return to the regulatory impact statement in respect of another number of matters. And I just note that, and the House and those listening at home should note, that the opposition has raised a series of pretty serious questions in part 1. There has not been one call from a government speaker. There has not been one call from the minister, who's not the portfolio holder, but nonetheless has a plethora of venerable officials behind him. Not one call, not one question answered. And that speaks volumes. Either the government or the minister, and he could be because he's not the portfolio minister, isn't confident in answering those questions. But, you know, we do have pieces of paper. We do have eminent officials who could provide that. I'm sure they're very willing to. In fact, I suspect they've written down on pieces of paper what the answers are, but not one response to any of the issues raised. So one could be forgiven for thinking, as we go through part 2 and raise further questions, that, you know, they won't be given house room by the minister or the government. That's how seriously they take this issue. Maybe they can't answer the questions, but we'll give it a go anyway. In referring to the executive summary, in the regulatory impact statement, one of the items which is cited is the government provides assistance to owners to access bank finance for remaining agreed repair costs by way of loan guarantees to banks for loans made to owners eligible for the assistance and who can meet the bank's lending criteria. Now, on the face of that, and my question flows from this, on the face of that, that is a good thing to do. Many of, I would argue most of these homeowners could not get assistance, could not of their own volition gain assistance from a bank given the equity in their home's been destroyed or the value of their home. The question is they're provided with some sort of loan assistance from the government if they can meet the bank's lending criteria. Now, my question to the Minister is you can't have one without the other, and it's a bit chicken and egg. So what sort of lending criteria, presumably the government, or it says within the RIS that they've liaised with the banks, that they've spoken with the financial institutions, what sort of lending criteria or the special lending criteria that might be put in place. Again, banks will be interested in securing some sort of value over the asset or the residual asset. So what in essence does that mean in practical terms? I commend the government for promoting the notion that they're going to somehow stand as, if we read this as some guarantor or whatever, but I'd like some explanation as to how that should work. I also note in the RIS that councils have identified the risk of being joined into litigation between the homeowner and other parties, e.g. the developer, builder, architect, as a significant barrier to them agreeing to sign up to the scheme. Have all local authorities signed up, is a question. If they haven't, how many are exposed to litigation and therefore have been reluctant to sign up? Because it goes to the heart of part 2 as we look at the criteria, as we look at as certain applications continue on the basis of amended law, whether affected claimants are deemed to be eligible in terms of claims. It goes right to the heart of it, because if they can't get their part of the assistance package up, then this is meaningless to them. This is absolute, doesn't work. And I'd be grateful for some sort of explanation as to what paragraph 10, third bullet point means in practical terms. What actually is the government going to do? Are they going to stand guarantor for everyone? And if they are, I would have thought the government being the biggest entity in New Zealand, that the bank's lending criteria would have been met absolutely, because you can't get any better security than a government-backed guarantee. If the government is going to do that, then what's the projected cost? Because again, in the RIS, it doesn't make reference to that. Is it an open-ended envelope for between 42 and 89,000, as per the advice we have, estimated claimants? What's the quantum? What's the exposure to the Crown? What's the fiscal risk? I think all these are particular issues which haven't been addressed in any of the documents which lie on the table or in the legislation that I've seen. And again, you know, just to roll the dice and have another go, having faith in the government, as sometimes we do, again, I'd be grateful for an explanation which pertains to all parts, the whole legislation, an explanation as to what paragraph 4 in the RIS means. You know, therefore there is uncertainty about the costs and benefits of the options. Well, that pertains right across the legislation to every clause. And I think that's a key issue that There are specialist lawyers who are, Mr Chair,
Oh, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
there are specialist lawyers who will be looking at this very carefully, and they will want to know what that means. Now, the most cynical amongst us could simply say that the government, given they're not interested in taking any calls, that no one on the government side has responded to any of the issues that have been raised, either they're not confident, maybe the new backbenchers, can't blame them too much, aren't, but surely the minister backed by a department is, and he is duty-bound to put on the record of the House in the committee stage and at least answer some of these questions. The portfolio minister, I would have thought, would want to take a high degree of interest in this and answer some of those questions. After all, we know Nick Smith is very good at bandying around slogans and slinging the proverbial when it comes to these issues at question time and in other places in this chamber, but when it actually comes to a surgical, precise examination of his legislation, then the silence is deafening from the government, completely deafening. And Nick Smith may pay a price for that as he pushes this legislation through the House. So, out of goodwill, maybe the minister might have another crack. I'm sure that I can look at the officials and they look like they're itching to provide some answers. It would be great. They can't do that under our law unless it comes through the minister.
To them.
Oh, indeed. But they can't, these answers can only come from the vacuum that is the government. And at the moment, the silence, sir, is deafening. Every leaky home owner would appreciate some clarity tonight. Every leaky home owner, I think, would look with goodwill at this legislation, part one, part two, the whole shebang, hoping that it will assist them. I just found it astounding, after all Nick Smith's rhetoric over years, that when the rubber hits the road in the committee stage, there are no answers. Now, either that says this is just a load of political horsepucky or a bit of propaganda, and there isn't really a commitment to solving it, it's just a bit of a patch-up job, or maybe we've raised some pretty genuine issues which cannot be answered. If officials are saying they are uncertain about the costs and benefits of a proposal, that's a pretty heavy-duty statement for officials to make about legislation. And normally a minister would leap to their feet and deal with that issue and extinguish it. Tonight, sir, we've had absolutely none of that, no explanation. Maybe we'll get one. There's still, 7 or 8 minutes to go before the final bell. But I think it would actually pay the government to stand by their own legislation, sir, to stand by it, and if they believe in it, and they believe it would work, to provide that certainty. Oh, good God.